How combustible was Xiaoyan's first battle when he traveled to the Guzu. The commander of the Heian Jun army, Lin Quan, was almost kicked to death by Xiaoyan. After the successful resurrection of Yalao, his strength directly soared to the half-saint realm. Soon after, he received an invitation from the Guzu, inviting him to attend their bar mitzvah. The Yaralo readily agreed to this and decided to send Xiaoyan as his representative to the ancient sacred city to attend the appointment. The Xingyunj was quite far from the ancient sacred city, and even with the speed of Xiaoyan and the others, coupled with the shuttling of the spatial wormholes, it would still take nearly half a month. Faced with such a situation, Sakyan and the others also had no choice but to bury their heads in the sand to catch up. After all, going to the Guzu at the so-called bar mitzvah was just less than 1 month away. If they went late, they were afraid that they would have to miss this rare event. On the azure sky, a huge black shadow swept past like lightning, bringing up gusts of fishy wind along the way, spreading out like ripples. Holding a map in her hand, the Shixian said towards Xiaoyan in front of her, "According to our current speed, we will be able to arrive at the ancient sacred city in another 5 days." Upon hearing this, Xiaoyan nodded slightly. The reputation of this city was extremely loud, even surpassing the sacred Dan city in the Dan domain, as it was the entrance to the ancient realm. Immediately afterward, his gaze turned towards Qinglin as he inquired, "There is nothing strange, is there?" Qinglin shook his head and said, "Within 100 miles, there are no spatial fluctuations. We left very suddenly. It wasn't easy for the Hall of Souls to track us." In his pair of beautiful eyes, 3 tiny black dots slowly rotated. Any energy fluctuations within 100 miles would be taken into their eyes. After having the Qinglin sitting in the town, it could be considered quite difficult for the people from the Hall of Souls to take Xiaoyan and the others by surprise once again. Upon hearing this, Xiaoyan lightly laughed. "In that case, let's speed up." As the words fell, only that spacecraft was seen to swipe out like a meteor, disappearing at the end of the sky in the blink of an eye. Time was like quicksand. 5 days had passed in the blink of an eye. A huge city that vaguely appeared in the field of vision of Xiaoyan and the others. At the first glance of the city, Xiaoyan and the others could not help but be somewhat stunned, because the city was not as domineering as imagined, but rather gave people a feeling of ancient vicissitudes. As they got closer, the crowd realized that the city was wrapped in a layer of transparent light. Although this light seemed weak, it gave off a kind of pressure that originated from the depths of the soul, causing everyone to change color slightly. Tannhausen's whispered, "This ancient holy city is a remnant from ancient times, and it is said to have been built by the hand of that Dudi powerhouse of the Guzu. That light even contains a trace of the power of a Dudi." Xiaoyan sniffed and then realized, no wonder. As he got closer and closer, he could feel the pressure in his soul getting thicker and thicker. Seeing Xiaoyan's reaction, Tannhausen laughed. "In order to show respect to a strong Dudi, flying is prohibited within a radius of 1,000 feet of the ancient holy city. Let's go over on foot." After saying this, he took the lead and fell towards the ground. Xiaoyan and the others also quickly followed, and after the group landed, their speed did not decrease at all as they transformed into blurred silhouettes and sped towards the ancient city. Only when they were about to arrive at the entrance of the ancient holy city did the figures of Xiaoyan and the others slowly pause. This ancient sacred city was not something that could be entered at will, and if one did not receive an invitation from the Guzu, regular people were generally prohibited from entering. Xiaoyan and his group slowly walked forward along the line and finally arrived at the city gate after a long time. Only to see that on both sides of the entrance there were nearly 100 silhouettes dressed in black armor, holding long spears and standing straight up, their sharp and cold gazes constantly flickering around them, and a strong aura intertwined and diffused. The line of sight slowly swept through these silhouettes, and at a certain moment, Xiaoyan's gaze suddenly paused on a familiar figure, and at that moment, his eyes became mighty, Ling Quan. At the entrance of the city, a silhouette stood still. This person was precisely the commander of the Heian-jun, who had clashed with Xiaoyan several times, Ling Quan. It was not expected that just after arriving at the ancient sacred city, Xiaoyan would bump into him. It was really a narrow road between enemies. When Xiaoyan sized up Ling Quan's stern gaze also shifted. Looking at the familiar slim figure, his face was steeply gloomy. "Xiaoshai, who allowed you to come here?" Ling Quan's cold voice naturally attracted the attention of many melon eaters as their eyes scanned. They finally settled on Xiaoyan's body in surprise. The latter's achievement of the Danfui Championship had long been rumored in the Zhanzhou. However, looking at the situation in front of him, it seemed that the champion of the single meeting had a bit of a deep grudge against the young commander of the Guzu. Feeling the gazes cast from all sides, Xiaoyan's face remained as calm as ever. With a flick of his fingers, a jade card was shot towards Ling Quan in a lightning-like manner. Feeling the incoming strong wind, the latter's face sank slightly. The palm of his hand was surrounded by Du Qi, and then he violently probed out, grasping the jade card in his hand with great precision. Just as the palm of the hand just touched the jade plate, an extremely terrifying temperature was violently diffused from within the jade plate, baking the center of his palm with a thick white smoke. The intense pain coming from his palm caused Ling Quan to reveal an extremely painful expression. However, he was also not an ordinary character, and even gritted his teeth and chose to hold on. As his palm tightened its grip, the information within the jade plate was received in his brain. "So it's the Xingyunj Pavilion. How could a force of such strength receive an invitation from my Guzu?" Ling Quan's cold smile carried a clear sense of disdain. In his opinion, according to the strength of the Xingyunj Pavilion, it simply did not have the qualifications to accept the invitation. It was a pity that he was not clear that with Yao Lao's success in entering the half-saint level, the Xingyunj Pavilion of today had long since jumped out of the ranks of the 4 pavilions. Regarding Ling Quan's unseemly mockery, Xiaoyan's face remained ancient and calm as he faintly said, "It is clearly written in black and white above. If you do not recognize it, then go and ask the people of your Gu. Return the jade tablet." This tone of Xiaoyan's directly exasperated Ling Quan until his teeth itched. Holding a section of the jade token in his palm, he said in a cold voice, "Just come over and take it." However, Ling Quan's voice had just fallen when he suddenly felt a blur in front of his eyes. The jade token that he was holding tightly in his palm unexpectedly fell out of his hand in an instant. When he came back to his senses, he realized that the jade token had already appeared in Yayan's hand at some point. This turn of events was like a loud and large forceful pocket that was thrown in Ling Quan's face, causing his iron-green face to turn red. Under the annoyance, Ling Quan also forgot about his current status, and with a furious roar, he raised his palm and slapped it angrily at Xiaoyan. It was only that the fist wind danced, and before it could blast out a leg shadow, it actually appeared directly in front of him. As the terrifying forceful chew poured out, Ling Quan's figure only flew out in an instant and finally crashed heavily on the city wall. Falling down from the city wall, a mouthful of blood gushed out from Ling Quan, his face full of unbelief and shock. When they had met at the Yejia, his strength was still 1 star higher than Xiaoyan. At that time, although he was still unable to defeat Xiaoyan, he was at least able to fight with him head-on. But now, even the other party's movements could not be perceived, and he had completely lost. This kind of extreme change made him, who was arrogant by nature, feel the urge to spit out blood. Back then, that kid in the inner courtyard who he regarded as an ant, but in just a few years' time, he had completely stood above his head. At this moment, Xiaoyan, who was on the other side, flicked the jade token in his hand and put it into his nascent sphere before skimming over Ling Quan, who was filled with shock, and smiled. "Commander Linquan, I am sorry for being a bit heavy-handed. However, next time I will also trouble you not to do such stupid things again. After all, there are not many people who are as soft-handed as I am." Looking at the smile on Xiaoyan's face, Linquan's eyes were also rendered abnormally blood-red with anger. Turning his head, he angrily shouted to the guards behind him, "Black Annihilation Squad, capture him for me." The roar had just fallen, and without the slightest hesitation, the nearly 100 Gi warriors clad in black armor at the city gate aimed at Xiaoyan with a violent vibration of the long spears in their hands. Seeing the many Heianjun warriors pointing their lances at Xiaoyan, the Xiaoyurian and the others on the side also had a slight change in color, and their figures flashed and appeared beside Xiaoyan as their vast Du Qi surged out. Under the confrontation between the two sides, the atmosphere at the city gate suddenly became tense. The crowd of onlookers, however, sized up Xiaoyan and the others with interest, clearly feeling quite surprised that they dared to take action against the people of the Guzu in the ancient holy city. Xiaoyan's face sank slightly as he laughed out coldly. "Linquan, as the commander of the Heianjun, do you wish to take personal revenge? This jade sticker was issued by the Guzu, and since we hold it, we are guests of the Guzu, and with your position, I'm afraid you don't have the qualifications to capture me, right?" At those words, Linquan slightly stalled. He was just about to utter a stern cry, but it violently boomed out from the city wall. "Linquan, what are you doing?" Immediately, a figure swept down like lightning, landing heavily in front of the city gate like an iron tower. Seeing the person, Linquan couldn't help but change his face slightly, and after wiping away the blood at the corner of his mouth, he faintly said, "It's fine." Upon hearing these words, the silhouette frowned as his gaze skimmed towards Xiaoyan and the others. Through this, Xiaoyan was able to see this person's appearance. Like Linquan, he was also wearing a set of glossy and clear armor, but from the breath, it was much stronger than Linquan. According to Xiaoyan's senses, he should be a strong person whose strength had reached 3-star Duzhen. Those Heianjun warriors hurriedly bowed and called out after seeing this man, "Greetings to the 5th commander." One of them quickly spoke about what had happened earlier. Upon hearing the name Xiaoyan, the 5th commander was stunned. "You are Xiaoyan." He then frowned as he looked at the former, and there was a faint hint of hostility in his eyes. Xiaoyan's face was calm as he arched his hand at the 5th commander in front of him, and said, "New leader Pavilion Xiaoyan." Linquan sneered, "That's right, he is that Xian that the young lady is talking about. Do you still want to let him in now?" Hearing this, Xiaoyan frowned slightly. It seemed that his name was already known by many people in the Guzu. It was feared that the reason for this was mostly due to Xuner. The 5th commander, on the other hand, remained silent for a while and looked at Xiaoyan with a complicated gaze before turning his head and glaring out angrily at Linquan. "Do you have any brains? If he holds a jade sticker, he is a guest of my Guzu's banquet, like you. Do you want others to ridicule my Guzu?" Being angrily rebuked by the 5th commander, Linquan's face also became extremely ugly. However, due to the other party's status, he didn't dare to say anything more, and only retreated with a cold snort. After dismissing Linquan, the 5th commander cupped his fist at Xiaoyan and said in a deep voice, "Your Excellency Xiaoyan, please also stay in the ancient sacred city for a few days temporarily, and there will be someone who will receive you to the ancient realm at that time." Xiaoyan nodded slightly as he heard this. Although this 5th commander was also hostile towards him, he made a clear distinction between public and private matters and was far better than that spirit dog. However, what made Xiaoyan feel puzzled was that he had clearly met this person for the first time. So where did that hostility from the other party come from? Could it really be because of Xuner? Xiaoyan secretly let out a bitter smile. It was often said that a red face was a scourge, And this was indeed true, not to mention the fact that Suner was at the level of a scourge. It seemed that this trip to the ancient realm would not be smooth sailing.